I see this Donald Trump situation from a certain perspective, but I know Baba Makaro, you're gonna, give us your insight on it. I want to hear what you have to say about this, because a lot of times we see things the same way, and in some cases we have different opinions and different viewpoints. So, give us your insight on what you see in this situation, what's happening with Alvin Bragg and Donald Trump.
Well, what I see is a struggle within the power structure of the American empire. And so I think as people of African descent who are struggling for our own liberation and empowerment, we have to view it from that perspective rather than choosing sides, based on this conflict that is taking place. What they are calling now the political polarization, of the American body politic. And of course, we've seen this many times, during the history of this country. So I'm not really interested in the particulars of, what's taking place. What I find very interesting, and you could say it's a coincidence or whatever, but Donald Trump is facing 3 investigations, and all of the investigations are being led by prosecutors or state attorneys or district attorneys who are people of African descent. There's the investigation that's led by uh, the New York State Attorney General Letitia James. The investigation, which is getting the most attention, is led by the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who assumed office in January of 2022. And then there's an investigation in Georgia that's being led by the Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis. So, from the perspective of optics, what you have in Donald Trump is the symbol of what I would call the new iteration of white redemption. Now, the original redemption campaign or white redemption campaign took place after the Civil War, which they call the Lost Cause. And these were people who actually, lost the war on the battlefield, but they remained thoroughly grounded in white supremacy and in their belief that, they would be able to regain their positions, the position they did have. And they systematically went about the process of doing this largely through violence. And so they were called the Redeemers. They were trying to redeem themselves from losing the Civil War. And once they convinced, we had another conflict in 1876 over the presidential election. It led to the compromise, the Hayes-Tilden Compromise, known as the Compromise of 1877, which the Southern states, the former Confederates, said that even though Tilden had the most votes, they would give the presidency to the Republican Hayes if the federal government would agree to remove the troops that were providing some degree of protection for the formerly enslaved African people of the South. And that way they could begin to roll back the gains that had taken place as a result of the 3 amendments, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, and the various laws that had been passed by the radical Republicans, the most justice-oriented politicians in the history of this country, in my opinion, at least in terms of people who actually had power to enforce things. They passed a number of laws between the 1866 Civil Rights Act and the enforcement acts of the early 1970s. And then once they got a president in power in the form of Ulysses S. Grant, they were able to do some of the things that they really wanted to do in terms of bringing about justice in this country. But the Redeemers, white supremacy, eventually won. So even though they lost the Civil War, they won the aftermath, and they instituted the second cycle of white supremacy that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, known as American apartheid. So the people who feel that the America that they knew, the America that they had, uh, is slipping away from them, and so they are engaged in another redemption campaign, and and Donald Trump is the symbol of this redemption. They actually want an authoritarian leader who will reinforce white supremacy based on their understanding of how it should be implemented. They don't agree with the the white supremacy that's been in place under people like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama and Joe Biden. So in terms of optics, and we can show some of the optics, some of the media from the time frame between, say, the 1870s and 1900, where and some people have seen this in clips from D.W. Griffith's movie Birth of a Nation, where black people were literally shown to be just the virtual animals that were chasing after white women, and who were ruining the state legislatures of the former Confederacy, by their voting, and et cetera, et cetera. So uh, the images that they could use here with Trump versus Bragg and Willis and James, you know, could incite the same type of violence against innocent African people that we saw in places, for example, like in 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina. So that's my concern more so than particularly if we're talking about the case that Bragg is prosecuting, which involves a hundred and allegedly and $130,000 payment to a woman that Trump apparently had an affair with. He wanted to keep it quiet while he was running for president in 2016, and so supposedly this hush money was transferred, and then it was covered up. So, in terms of criminals, committed on an institutional level, I'm not saying that Trump isn't guilty, but it doesn't begin to compare to the crimes, for example, of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, who's now transitioned, Donald Rumsfeld, and others. I mean, these were heinous crimes where, in a just world, they would have been taken before something comparable to the Nuremberg Tribunal, and they would have received sentences. Of course, the International Criminal Court has outlawed the death penalty, but they should be somewhere in prison. The same goes for the war of aggression that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton led on Libya. I mean, these are real criminals. But I'm not saying that Trump isn't guilty of whatever crime he committed, but comparatively speaking, they're going after him, but these other guys are walking free. But in terms of how it could impact us, and that's our concern. Um, this is what we've posted. By threatening Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, Trump is appealing to the basic instincts of his hardcore white supremacist supporters, directing their ire towards the people they hate the most, rather than towards the real source of their problems, the American oligarchs. Now, we have to understand, African people didn't have the power to create the Rust Belt. We didn't move manufacturing jobs out of this country. In fact, black males suffered more than any other group of people, as a result of the loss of these good paying manufacturing jobs. We didn't produce opiates, that's killing tens of thousands of white people. We didn't have the power to do any of these things, but the oligarchs are always able to keep them focused on us rather than on them, where they should be marching on Wall Street, but they'd rather have these lone wolves go into places like the supermarket in Buffalo and gun down a lot of innocent black people. So this is what Donald Trump said, and Trump is intelligent enough to know how to play this game that can result, quite frankly, in a lot of death. What kind of person? Now he's talking here about Bragg. What kind of person can charge another person, in this case, a former president of the United States, who got more votes than any sitting president in history, and the leading candidate by far of the Republican Party nomination, he's talking about for 2024, with a crime when it is known that no crime has been committed, and also that potential death and destruction in such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country? Why and who would do such a thing? Only a degenerate psychopath that truly hates the USA. So he's talking about a guy that's a functionary of the American law enforcement system, but in the language that he's generating, and particularly when he made his social media post that has appeared in outlets like the New York Post, for example, with him holding a baseball bat in one section of the image, and Alvin Bragg standing at a podium in the other. The message is clear. The playbook generally calls for them, and I'm talking about the raw elements of the white supremacy dynamic, to go after soft targets like the elderly people in the Buffalo supermarket. So that to me is what is at stake for us. No matter who may be manipulating it, the question is, are our people prepared for the potential consequences? That's number one. Number two, we should not be choosing sides, in this particular conflict. Um, so furthermore, it's interesting how Alvin Bragg wound up in this position. Um, and so I put up another post to say, who twisted Alvin Bragg's arm to make him go after Condon for paying a porn star to keep quiet about his dive into whatever? Was it Biden? Was it Obama? Who was it? So on February 23rd, 2022, Dunn and Pomerantz, the lead prosecutors in the New York County District Attorney investigation into Donald Trump and his business, resigned abruptly after Bragg indicated to them that he had doubts about moving forward with the case against Mr. Trump. Okay, so now this is in February 22. He had doubts. The doubts was to such an extent that the lead prosecutors on the case resigned. In his letter of resignation, Pomerantz, who wrote that the team had been investigating Mr. Trump, harbors no doubt whether he committed crimes, including falsifying business records and blank, 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 blank. The New York Times reported that Bragg balked at pursuing an indictment against Mr. Trump and lacked confidence proving in court that Trump knowingly falsified the value of his assets on financial statements. The Washington Post noted that Bragg was slow to meet with Dunn and Pomerantz after taking office, and when they finally met to discuss the case, a source in the DA's office commented that Bragg seemed distracted and disengaged. So here's a man who didn't appear to want to pursue this when he assumed office in January of 22. However, by November 21st, 2022, the New York Times reported that the district attorney's office has moved to jumpstart its criminal investigation into Trump's reported hush money payment to a porn star. Bragg confirmed to CNN in January 2023 that the probe was ongoing. On January 30, the office presented evidence to a grand jury regarding Mr. Trump's role in the payment. So now, what happened? What happened between February and November when Alvin Bragg totally flipped the script and said that he wanted to pursue the investigation, into these allegations against Trump? And what I'm saying is that someone in power obviously wants to see Trump prosecuted, and they twisted his arm. And so now, we have arrived at this situation where Donald Trump is saying his indictment could threaten death and destruction. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I know that there's a component of the American body politic that is desperate for an authoritarian leader, a Mussolini or Hitler type leader. Okay, I know they're desperate for that. They, if they believe Donald Trump is that person, that's on them. But here's a man who told them to march on the Capitol, told him he would be there with him, and he didn't show up. Hitler marched on Munich in the midst of gunfire, people dying all around him, and continued marching and got arrested. So, I mean, if they want to believe in this guy, that's on them. I'm not really concerned about that. What I am concerned about is, are our people prepared for what could come down the pipe? And it's not a matter of this is not a fear thing, right? Because, we operate from Kwame Nkrumah's position. The secret to life is to have no fear. It's just that we're concerned about the masses of our people who may not be prepared. And then when we get all these talking heads like Al Sharpton and all these others, paid spokespeople for the Democrat Party and the liberal elites, of the American empire. See, they are actually, they won't be the ones that will feel the fire. Okay, it'll be our innocent people. And so, that's the concern. And that's why I wanted to raise the issue, brother Amos.
I think you hit on you hit on a lot of good points actually, and a lot of what you stated is some of the concerns that I shared as well. If we go back to the FBI raid of Mar-a-Lago, and we know that Merrick Garland is the attorney general of the United States. So essentially, Loretta James, Alvin Bragg, and all of these prosecutors, their top boss is Merrick Garland. That's what we know. We know that they were hoping to arrest Donald Trump off of the evidence of the documents or the threat to national security, what have you, of the classified documents that were supposedly found at his home during that raid. We have not had anything come of that as of yet, and we know that we're getting closer to the 2024 election. And Donald Trump has announced that he will be running again. So essentially, when we say who pulled the arm or who twisted the arm of Alvin Bragg, we can easily, assume that it was Merrick Garland who did it.
Okay.
Or somebody in that administration and Biden's administration that told them to proceed with these charges because they want to try to get Trump on something that will prohibit him from running again.
Okay.
And as you stated, I believe that whenever they trot out a black person to perform these types of services in regards to or to pretty much do whatever they want them to do. Whenever they trot a black person out to do those things, in the eyes of the mainstream of white America, they're already having independent conversations with each other about crime, right? They see crime, they think, okay, it's black people that's out here beating people up, raping people, killing people. You made an excellent reference to D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation, which we saw the effects of the media and how that escalated things like Red Summer and others that happened after that movie was released.
Absolutely.
So and I want to try to pull this up on the screen. Just give me a chance to share this here. So when white Americans open up a news article that says, "Meet the 3 black prosecutors taking on Donald Trump," what they're seeing is a black person or black people trying to take down their hero.
That's right.
And this is going to create more Peyton Gendrons.
You know it.
Create more Dylan Roofs. This is going to create more attacks, as you stated, on us and not point the attacks on the people who really want Trump to be charged, like a Merrick Garland,
Right.
like a Joe Biden. or like anybody else, or Anthony Blinken, anybody else that is within Biden's administration who does not want Donald Trump to be president again.
Right.
But all in all, I think that, black people, we have to start being smarter and understanding the ramifications of what our choices can do when it comes to the effects that it can have on the majority of our people. I know that these people are in their positions and they're taking their individual paychecks, but Bragg, James, and the other sister down in Fulton County should have pushed back and said, no, I'm not going to pursue this. Um, Especially when you have a failed attempt by the FBI to try to prosecute Trump. At some point, you have to step back and say, okay, if you want to take him down, then you bring up the charges.
Yeah, let Merrick Garland bring the charges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let
Yeah.
Merrick. I mean, these guys are being used as cannon fodder. And like I said, I have not followed the details of what James is doing or Willis. I know it involves the attempt to overturn the election in Georgia. The Biden Trump the vote in Georgia, and Lindsey Graham and others have had to go down there and testify regarding their role in that. I'm not. I don't have. I have no doubts about the criminality of of Trump and these other people. I mean, this is par for the course. I mean, if they got to stoop to try to get something on him with a woman. I mean, my God,
I
John.
mean, just think about the taxes, right? It was a big thing about Trump's taxes being released
Hmm.
as he became the president.
Right.
The taxes got released, and then after that, it just got quiet. It was almost as if they didn't have enough in that release to try to damage his reputation enough to be able to run for president. So they're grasping at all of these different things. And like you stated, all of these president, I mean, we can name numerous things that Joe Biden should be prosecuted for right now in regards to just his son's dealings with other countries and the money trail that comes back to him
Yeah. Ukraine, China. Go.
is
Where
is
does
is
it stop?
is far more criminal than Donald Trump paying off a porn star.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I said, that's why I hold up the example of George W. Bush. I mean, here's one of the preeminent war criminals in history, particularly when you look at the continuing ramifications of this crime of aggression. As a matter of fact, there was an Iraqi. Uh, she was a mother, I think, of a child or maybe a husband who was killed. She sued George Bush in the federal court in San Francisco in 2013. The Obama administration, and we know the Obama administration had two black attorney generals, uh, came to his defense
Mm.
and said that he was immune from prosecution because he was carrying out, he was acting as the chief executive of the United States government. Therefore, the lawyers representing this Iraqi woman who lost family members were using the crimes of aggression statute, which is which was first used at the Nuremberg Tribunal against the Nazis, and then it became enshrined in international law via the Rome Statute, which the United States, oh by the way, is not party to. Russia isn't either. They've indicted Putin. Uh, they never indicted Bush, but uh, so so she had a legitimate uh, case based on the crimes of aggression statute, and the Obama administration came to the defense of Bush, and the case was thrown out. So these are real serious crimes. But what I'm particularly interested in, like I was saying, I mean, I don't know what the situation is with James. I understand what Willis is doing in Georgia, but here you have Bragg saying that there was nothing there in February. And so it had to be someone with power. It had to be someone with power. I just threw out the name. Obama is still behind. He's still playing the wizard behind the curtain.
Mhm.
Biden is doing whatever somebody wakes him up and tells him to do. But Garland and Blinken and those, Harris is basically just an empty dress. But there's some real power people, and they have it set up so perfectly so that the attention will be focused on us.
Mhm.
I mean, this is it's quite amazing. But my concern that our people need to be aware of what's going on, so that they can be prepared. I mean, there's just no walking around daydreaming, talking on the cell phone, and not being aware of what's going on in your surroundings. That's
Yeah, and white people need to be smarter and realize that they're being played.
absolutely.
You constantly you have this right wing, left wing, all wings are the same bird, and that bird is controlled and that plane is navigated by Israel.
Yeah.
The minute that whites figure that part out, then they can clearly see who is trying to manipulate them and take their aggression and point it towards someone else.
Yeah, that you see, they they are so blinded, by the hatred that emanates from the mass-based philosophy of white supremacy, that it's always directed towards us based on what has been inculcated in their psyche, into their what Dr. Ani calls their culturally structured thought.
Mhm.
They are so they can't see, as I said, the real source of their problem. The real source of their problem. We didn't create all of these problems for them. The things that they now that they now view as problems, in terms of, all of the jobs that went away, and how all of these, textile, all these little towns right around here where we live, over in Cherryville and other places where all of these jobs are going away. You ride through places like Lincoln, and you see all of these just empty buildings where they once had textile. We didn't pass NAFTA.
Mhm.
We didn't, black men lost more jobs per capita than anybody, and it's had a more destructive impact on us than anybody. When I get back to the points I was making last week, in a future program, I'll lay this out. But these guys, these oligarchs, uh, they're smart enough to understand that. It's just like I tell you the example I always use. When 19 Arabs were accused, or Muslims were accused of the attacks of September 11th, 2001, then every Arab in the world, except for the Saudis that the Bushes protected, that got out of the country, every Arab in the world may as well have been a black man in Mississippi in 1955 when a white woman cried rape.
Mhm.
When a white woman cried rape in Mississippi in 1955, any black man they picked up on the street was guilty and could be lynched. So
Mhm.
Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with 9/11, who actually was an enemy of Osama bin Laden, they were able to use that cheap psychology, because for the white supremacy dynamic, retaliatory violence and initiatory violence are therapeutic. When people whom they view as inferior do things that they shouldn't be capable of doing, they have to retaliate in order to alleviate their psychological trauma, because inferior people are not supposed to be able to do things like this.
Mm.
So Hussein may as well have been a black man in Mississippi in 1955 when a white woman cried rape. This is the way it works. This is the way it works. These guys, James Braggs, Willis, and all of the others, they're just functionaries. They just they are playing a role, but the role they're playing can have devastating impact on the masses of African people, and we are left to fend for ourselves.